Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning to you. You. Good morning to you. And many more, and many more, and many more. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome, welcome, welcome to Daring Dialogues, Black Table Talk Edition. I am your host today, Shante Charles, and we are back from our break. Now, I will have to be out again this Friday and into next week, but I do want you to know that we are officially back. We will be on today, obviously, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Today, we are simulcasting on our Black Table Talk Facebook page as well as our YouTube. But for the rest of the week, Black Table Talkers, if you're interested in joining us Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 11 a.m. for more book talks, we will be over there on YouTube. And by the time this video is done, our YouTube information should show up in the bottom commentary. So if you want to click on that and then hit the notification button, hit subscribe to join us for the rest of the week. All right. So I put out some images from last night's Golden Globe Award. We're only going to spend just a moment on that. And I'm kind of chuckling to myself because when I went to sleep, I said, nobody's really kind of talking about this just yet because the awards had just finished. And I said, now watch, I'm going to go to sleep and all is calm on my post. And I'm going to go to sleep and I'm going to wake up to several comments about this award show, and people are going to be going to comments now. Um, and so I want to say a couple of things about the Golden Globes, just so people know where I'm coming from. And I did make a note on the post, but I see people don't read. Anybody else having that problem online when you post? People are responding to the image more so than they're responding to your words. They don't see your words, or they don't read your pinned post, so they're responding more so to the image than they are to what you are saying about the thing, right? So here's number one. If you're going to come and comment on my page about the Golden Globes, number one, we know how award shows work. You don't have to come over here and teach the poor little black people who don't know any better, okay? We know how award shows work. I've done some acting myself. I know several people, I have several friends that work in Hollywood on different levels. Um, I've edited screenplays and scripts. We know how they work. So you don't have to come and lecture us about award shows and how they work. All right. It's a little on the paternalistic side too. We're not looking for award shows to validate us. If you know anything about my work and my page, you know that validation from pseudo supremacist systems is the last thing on my mind. So you don't have to again come over and lecture us and tell us what we need to be validated by and all of this stuff. Like, that's not the conversation here. You can can that conversation. It's okay. You don't have to bring that commentary. All right. Number three, we are invested in Ryan Coogler, just like we're invested in Spike Lee, just like we were invested in John Singleton. Can I get a witness? Okay. We are invested in Ryan Coogler and Black cinema and Black actors. We are invested in them. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Okay. And then the last thing I want to point out is that cultural commentary is not the same thing as expecting a pseudo supremacist system to give you your flowers. All right. This page is a cultural, we comment on what the culture is doing. We comment on what the culture is thinking. The memes that I know how to get people's attention. Okay. So it's cultural commentary. Once again, it's cultural commentary. We're not expecting validation. We're having a cultural conversation about the look that Black people give you when we know that you are playing in our faces about the excellence that we operate in and put out. There is a look that Black people give you when we see that you are playing in our face. And it goes something like this. Okay? That's what Ryan Coogler was doing last night. And some of us just screenshotted it and we just caught it. It's what Michael B. Jordan was doing, I think, a couple weeks ago. He did the same look that, okay, we see y'all gave the award to somebody else. We get it. We understand the get down in the get down of the pseudo supremacist system. We get it. That still does not negate that we know that we did what we did, right? That still does not negate that we know that we put out some excellent craft, excellent work, perfect cinema, um, worldwide box office hits, international box office hits, hit to the point where, you know, Coogler gets his rights back, right? Based on the deal that he made. So it's cultural commentary. That's all it is. It's not, we are, I think Black people are past being mad about what we don't get in a pseudo supremacist system. At least I know, I think most of us are. You can tap the screen if you agree with that. That Black people are really past waiting on you all to acknowledge what we already know to be true. He did the thing. He did the thing in America. He did the thing overseas, right? So, yes, we know that this was a foreign press award and the focus was not primarily on American cinema. We get that. We also know he did the thing both here in America and internationally. The numbers don't lie. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. People's opinion might fall short of what the numbers tell us, right? But we know the numbers don't lie, which is why they had to give him I think it was the Cinematic Achievement. I think that was the award he got, the Global Cinematic Achievement Award, because he did the thing at the box office. So you can't deny that. You can't refute that. Now, in terms of your personal taste and your personal opinion, obviously, yes. Yes, that's going to vary. But I just wanted people who were swinging by, I just wanted people who were swinging by the commentary on my page to know we know how award shows work. All right. We are not invested in these pseudo supremacist systems determining our value or validating us as a people. We are a validating people. We are a self-validating people. Black people have never waited around for someone to make us feel good about ourselves. We will be waiting forever. Okay? We would literally be waiting forever. But the fact that we love ourselves, the fact that we make ourselves feel good about ourselves, the fact that we have cultural cues within our culture that people want to be invited in should tell you that we are fine validating ourselves. Okay? And again, we are interested in Black directors, Black cinema, Black actors, Black films, Black cultural moments. I don't know. Some of you, maybe you're not. But when it comes to this page, we are very much interested. Okay. And yes, when we see something happen in our culture, we can reflect on it, we can acknowledge the moment, and we can keep it moving. All right. So, cultural commentary, learn how to recognize, and I think this goes back to media literacy. Learn how to recognize when somebody is just doing cultural commentary, because that's what we did. We did cultural commentary versus them expecting a pseudo supremacist system to come out and acknowledge what we already know to be true. Make sense? Make sense? All right. Now I'm gonna go back to that post, and I know I'm gonna have to hide some more people that did not get the memo. All right. So what are we doing today? Besides talking about the fabulous, beautiful people um, that we saw in their fashion at the Golden Globes. I'm not going to get into that. There are enough fashion pages out here. We are continuing our read aloud, and we are reading from Black AF History. And this is another book that we are reading from, Illustrated Black History, Honoring the Iconic and the Unseen. And this is a really powerful book. I was reading a little bit more in the introduction over the holiday break, and it's one particular person, George McCalman, and he started out by doing 30 days, I think he said during Black History Month, where he decided that he was going to look up and define different people historically and challenge himself as an artist to create a drawing for each one of those people. Well, it turned into, I believe, 180 drawings and studies that he's done. And so I am amazed by it as a visual artist as well, because he has chosen to do different medium for each person. So he's drawing them in different medium. And as an artist, we always want to look at trying to challenge ourselves in our work. So he was doing the drawings at the same time he was doing the research. And so I want to take a look at a couple of people here that maybe you don't know. So let's go to his table of contents and let's see who we can pull up today that might be someone you don't know. Let's see. Some of these, he said, are well-known people. Some of these, he said, are not well-known people. So let's see who we got here. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, he's got a couple of my favorite people in here. Let's see. I know everybody on this page. I know quite a few of these, but that's because I read Black history all the time. Yep, I know them. Okay, let's do. Some people may know her, some people may not know her. So let's do her. Let's do Diane Nash. Diane Nash. And if you know Diane, if you've heard of Diane Nash, put some hearts on the screen. I can see who we're dealing with. Diane Nash. All right, and she is still presently living. All right, and that's his artistic work for Diane Nash. Let's read. Diane Nash was born in 1938. Quote from her: "There probably was no greater invention during the 20th century than Gandhi's invention of how to really wage warfare and change society using nonviolence. But in studying Gandhi, if you've ever read any of Gandhi's works, Gandhi would tell you that he learned how to wage warfare using nonviolence by following the teachings of Jesus. Did y'all know that? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That he ultimately came to the conclusion that love was nonviolent warfare. And this is why I continue to tell people love is a weapon that most people never use. It's available to you every single day, but most people never pull the trigger on that. Let's read. For anyone who hasn't experienced the oppressive side of segregation as it was lived and documented in the 1950s American South, deep empathy and a studied gaze down history's path is required to even glimpse the recurring despair. No matter how optimistic you might have been, there it was, your assigned inferiority just waiting to douse your vibrant flame. It's easy to assume that the distance provided by time is the reason that the era of segregation feels absurd. I can't imagine living that way, you might say. They're trying to bring us back to living that way. But distance from that period is not what buffers you from such inhumane treatment. Rather, it is the courage of mainly young people during that time who, in the face of systematic racism and violence, decided to begin the work of dismantling America's Jim Crow laws. Born into a middle class family in Chicago, Diane Nash began her college education at Howard University in Washington, D.C., before transferring to Fisk University in Nashville in 1959. Both were celebrated historically black universities, but one was firmly based in a region that had long been dominated by Jim Crow laws and practices. It was in Nashville that the effects of segregation began their assault on the 21-year-old student. Nash learned about and then learned from Reverend James Lawson, who was teaching young people various nonviolent protest methods at a church not far from campus. Please show me the church that is still teaching methods of warfare in activism. I want to go to that church. Lawson taught many young people who would become integral to the nonviolent movement in pursuit of equal justice, including John Lewis. In 1960, Nash participated in the sit ins that sought to desegregate lunch counters in Nashville. Following a march of several thousand people to City Hall, the city became the first in the South to end that type of segregation. The protest effort helped launch the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, also known as SNCC, which Nash co-founded with Charles Jones, Charles Sherrod, Ruby Doris Smith, and many others. They coordinated more sit-ins in other cities, supporting and training other young student activists. This is all while they were attending college themselves and trying to pursue their degrees. In 1961, Nash participated in the Freedom Rides launched by the Congress of Racial Equality, also known as CORE, in which black and white people together rode buses into the South to protest segregation policies of interstate travel. So they sort of had a plan where they were they were trying to desegregate separate types of entities. Okay, so they started with the lunch counters, moved on to interstate travel, desegregation of transportation. Freedom Ride buses were often attacked by the Ku Klux Klan including with fire bombs. I want to mention again, all while they're trying to pursue their degrees. During that time, Nash was arrested for teaching nonviolent protest tactics to minors. She was convicted of contributing to their delinquency and faced a 2 year jail sentence as a married and pregnant woman. There's a whole lot I could say about that because we often try to uh, separate out the kinds of people that were involved in these movements. Um, and then you have a whole generation that was literally born through the movement, like the child in the womb of Diane Nash, who was literally born in the movement. After an open letter in which she restated her convictions and her willingness to serve time, if it may help hasten that day when my child and all children will be free, the judge sentenced her to 10 days in jail. She continued her activist work with SNCC from 1961 to 1965. She eventually returned to her native Chicago and worked in education. Why would she work in education? Hmm, I wonder why. Why would they be trying to dismantle the Department of Education? I wonder why. Why would they be trying to strip the Department of Education from serving children with special needs? I wonder why. Why would they be trying to further privatize education so that most of the money that supports education only goes to privatized education? Hmm, I wonder why. Why would they be trying to just overhaul education altogether, seeing that more black and brown children are now in free public education than are non black and brown children? I wonder why. To pursue the fight for equality, Nash had dropped out of Fisk. In 2009, the university gave her an honorary degree. Because what are we doing? Anybody anybody learn about Diane Nash just now? It's okay if you have, put some hearts on the screen. If you've just now heard about Diane Nash for the first time. Mm, 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 mm. I want to do one more. I love talking about her because I actually got a chance to go to her congressional office, which is memorialized, but I'm going to skip her for today. Blah, 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 Yeah, let's talk about her. Eliza Ann Greer. Anybody heard of her before? Eliza Ann Greer. Eliza Ann Greer. Let's learn. Eliza Ann Greer lived from 1864 to 1902. The quote here says, "When I saw colored women doing all the work in cases of accouchement, or also known as childbirth, and all the fee going to some white doctor who merely just looked on, I asked myself, why should I not get the fee myself? For this purpose, I have qualified." Eliza Ann Greer put forth extraordinary effort to become the first black woman licensed to practice medicine in Georgia. Born in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina in 1864, coinciding roughly with the emancipation of the enslaved, Greer initially pursued a career in education and studied at Fisk University. But she shifted her focus to getting a medical education, perhaps understanding how pivotal her impact could be. Greer wrote to the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania to explain that she and her family had very little money and wondered if assistance might be provided for an emancipated slave to receive any help into so lofty a profession. She completed her education at that college in 1897 after 7 years of alternating each year of study with a year of arduous labor picking cotton so that she could afford the tuition. With her degree secured, Greer went on to practice in Atlanta. But she tragically became ill in 1901 and ultimately died at the age of 38 after practicing for only a few years. Greer's desire to acquire formal training in order to practice medicine can best be understood in light of the shifting medical landscape in the United States at the turn of the 20th century. Throughout pre colonial Africa and then in the African diaspora, Black women were always at the center of care for their communities. These healers or medicine women tended to the body, the mind, and the spirit, and carried knowledge of remedies and other ancient practices. Even throughout enslavement, as African traditions were systematically being erased, many African American healers continued community based care underground. And I have a whole 7 hour series on understanding that through the practice of hoodoo. You can go watch that on YouTube. It's one of the top series noted on hoodoo. But as the medical field advanced and continued to be led by white males who typically mistreated Black people, seeing them merely as case studies in which personal consent was deemed irrelevant, it pushed Black women healers to the fringes, especially in the field of gynecology and obstetrics. Holistic care grew ever more distant from many Black communities, and women we would today describe as nutritionists, as doulas, as lactation advisors, and so on, those women were barred from practicing without state approved licensing. In other words, their normal care for Black women became a credentialized process, oftentimes shutting them out of practices that they were already engaged in. That Black women as midwives were replaced by the medical establishment, which would go on to undervalue Black life in myriad ways more than 100 years later. And we're still seeing the fallout of what happens when you removed ancestral practice and care. We're still seeing the fallout. Look at the Black maternal health rate. We're still seeing the fallout of thinking that you knew better. Mhm. This was surely not hidden from Greer's view, but one wonders what professionals would have populated the modern day hospital had Greer lived on and thrived in her field. Would her accomplishments and her tireless work ethic have inspired other Black women to enter medicine? Imagine a generation of Black women mentored by this tenacious, intelligent woman and the many women like her. Oh my, history would have volumes. And the reality is, we're starting to regain some of that, um, but we got to pick up the pace. We got to pick up the pace. Um, and that story actually kind of strikes me in particular, um, hearing about what happened to the author. I think her name is Chimamanda Ngozi, and the recent passing, the recent death of her 21 month year old, not year old, 20-month old son, and how he got ill on a trip, I think in Nigeria, got ill on the trip. They were supposed to take him into a hospital to stabilize him. He was doing okay when he went in the hospital. They took him to the hospital to stabilize him, and then they were supposed to get on a flight the next day to get him back to take him to John Hopkins. He never made it out of that hospital. Allegedly, they over anesthetized her son. He went into some seizures and cardiac arrest, and her son passed away. Come to find out, the person that was working had already had two other cases where they had over anesthetized two other children, and they were still working in that space. She can't get her child back, and that person needs to go to jail. Because why? Why would they still there? So that is pretty infuriating. Um, but yeah, it sort of speaks to the lack of care and the way that she described it. It was definitely some medical neglect at play. So I hope they will do a thorough investigation, and rest in power to her son and condolences to her because she can't get her son back. All right, we're going back into Michael Harriot's book. We're in The World Recentered. The World Recentered. And I'm just going to read one section here. We're nearing the end of this chapter. We started talking about the ways in which the world is being centered around what Black Americans, Black Africans at the time, were bringing to the New World. And we started talking about rice cultures and how those rice cultures were being brought to the Carolinas. So let us continue. In most West African rice societies, men rarely did any farming aside from the occasional heavy lifting. Nairn would never be able to test out his hypothesis because he was tortured and killed by the Yamasee natives for thinking he could negotiate a settlement after stealing their land. By 1710, enslavers knew to demand the same price for African women as they did for African men. Once they realized that it was African women who were really in charge of the process for how rice was being grown and cultivated, they started bringing more African women over. At first, they were not paying the same amount for African women as they were African men, but then they started to because of this process. And thus came the influx of women into the area. On Governor Robert Alston's Georgetown, South Carolina plantation, the women did most of the farming, while the men cut and hauled wood or performed other tasks. The women were also responsible for milling, dehusking, and winnowing the rice into an edible product. To achieve this, they combined West African technology with the resources available at the time in South Carolina. They built the tools and engineered complex machinery. Instead of using palm leaves to separate rice from its hull, they used South Carolina or Carolina sweetgrass to weave baskets for tossing the rice into the air. So when you see a sweetgrass basket, it is not just for decoration. Most people now, I have a couple of them that I got from Charleston when I was there. Um, Went to the large Charleston market there to get my baskets from actual basket weavers, not manufactured ones. Okay, those baskets were used for tossing the rice into the air. They milled the rice with their handmade mortar and pestles and built the tools to turn the land. Every time these rice plantation owners imported more Africans, their empire expanded. As historian Peter Wood notes in Black Majority, with respect to rice cultivation, particular know how rather than lack of it was one factor which made Black labor attractive, attractive, no matter how they cut it. They'll lie and say it was something else. No, Black labor was attractive to the English colonists. Some, like the Draytons, enslaved hundreds and saw their profits soar as a result. By the time the first shots, of the American Revolution were fired, Magnolia Plantation had ballooned to 1,872 acres, an area twice the size of present day Harlem, with hundreds of heads of livestock that roamed vast acres of cow pens. When Nairn was calculating the exact worth of putting his enslaved females to work, he also remarked that South Carolina abounds with cattle, to a degree much beyond any other English colony. People have 1,000 head, but for a man to have 200 here is very common, he said. And just as the naturally gifted female horticulturalist field gals were adept at growing and harvesting rice, South Carolinians discovered that enslaved persons from the plains of Ghana and Gambia were skilled at herding cattle. So don't let them lie to you and say, oh, these were unskilled workers. The black people should be so glad to be in America because they learned all of their skills here. Lies. Lies. They lie like a rug. Unlike the white buckaroos and poor crackers who use whips, the black cattlemen use salt, fire, and dogs to corral the livestock when the plantation owners needed to find them again, usually around tax time, making the cowboys as valuable as the field gals. So when you're looking at, people often talk about the term cowboy and how it was just associated with black men, right? The opposite or the counterpart to the cowboy was the field gal. Now, who's going to do a documentary on that? Hint, hint. And as a result of their ingenuity, hard work, and savvy, these men and women often died from the labor, the over labor. Life on a rice plantation was so fraught with disease and death that planters generally didn't expect their human capital to live past the age of 19, which is why you bring in the idea of chattel enslavement or breeding farms, right? Because they're seeing human beings as expendable. If I don't expect you're going to live past 19, then guess what? I need more capital. I need more people. One Charleston owner remarked that he would as soon stand 50 feet from the best Kentucky rifleman and be shot at by the hour as to spend my night on a plantation in the summer. The low life expectancy combined with an infant mortality rate that was 10 times the rate for white infants had one bright spot. On rice plantations, the high risk of catching malaria, yellow fever, and other contagious diseases meant that white people didn't bother their enslaved persons as much as they did on other types of plantations. Unlike those in many other slave societies, South Carolina's enslaved worked on the task system. Enslaved people were responsible for their own food, their own clothing, and even their own medical care. Each captive had a required amount of work that they had to complete, and once they were done, they were released from their enslavers' oversight to then go work in their own gardens, sew their own clothes, or make their own money. Charleston even had an elaborate tag system that allowed enslaved people to sell goods and food at the market. From this white man free vacuum emerged a new culture and language that was a hybrid of those of the Africans from the Caribbean colonies and the Baga, the Fula, the Kisi, the Capelli, the Lemba, the Mandinka, the Mende, and the Wolof of West Africa. They balanced the memories of their motherland on the bridges of their noses and hid them on the tips of their tongues. Their collective souls merged and became the Gullah Geechee, a cultural force that no white person would ever have power and authority over. And all of this just makes my heart sing because my family is North Carolina, South Carolina, Charleston, and the power of the Gullah Geechee language and the Gullah Geechee tongue as my family began to make their way from the Carolinas to Georgia to then South Florida. Many of the people in my very small, rural, all black town, um, I feel like I sort of grew up in a black Wall Street sort of environment or enclave because we were cut off from a lot of the major things. I grew up in a place called West Perrine, way down in South Florida. Pastor Ben has driven that down that far. It's before you get to Homestead. It's sort of right in between Miami, the city part of Miami, and Homestead. It's in that area. I'm a Chevis from the Carolinas. Awesome. My family is the Georges and Spaldings, Carolinas. Connected to the Spaldings who were the one right in that little enclave in Florida. I grew up speaking. I grew up speaking Gullah Geechee language, not really knowing until I left my own little black enclave and community and went outside of that, not really realizing that I was speaking another Creole or dialect, um, because I grew up around it. So when I left that enclave and went to college, sometimes people would ask me, "Where are you from? What are you speaking?" And I didn't know how to take that at first because I was like, "This is how I speak. This is how I've always spoken." Um, but then also learning more about the Carolinas, learning more about the Gullah Geechee corridor, um, educating myself on what that meant. Like I grew up, my mom would tell me about the Gullah Geechee people, but she didn't say we were Gullah Geechee. She just said, we're from the Carolinas. And these are some of the words that we share and we speak. But a lot of people in my community had come down from the Carolinas and wound up in the same little enclave. So it was a continuation, which is why I often say the Gullah Geechee corridor. Most people know the Gullah Geechee corridor as the Carolinas, going into Georgia, going into um, down through I think St. Augustine is where their official corridor stops. But I tell people, no, you need to go a little farther. I've talked to people who are in Tampa, in Orlando, along with South Florida, who are also Gullah Geechee. So I look forward to seeing more work being done on that and the expansion of that corridor coming all the way down to South Florida. All right, we're going to stop there. When we come back on next week, we're going to talk about more on the Gullah Geechee and the Gullah Geechee language. Again, we are reading from Black AF History, written by Michael Harriot. And I believe Michael Harriot is from South Carolina. So I think that's also his connection to the study, particularly of the Gullah Geechee. All right, so let's chop it up a little bit. If you are watching by YouTube, I want to thank you for your time and your attention. Again, the earlier book we were looking at was Illustrated Black History. I highly recommend this book, especially if you want to gift it to someone, you want to gift it to young readers. I would say upper elementary school or higher, middle school, high school. You're trying to engage young people on Black history in a very, um, I would say, concise way. It's illustrated, and most of these segments are 1 page long. So if you're trying to introduce them to a lot of people that they can then go and do further study on, this is an excellent resource. Um, the regular price on it is $40. I got it um, at a book sale for like 50% off. Um, but check, it's on several different sites, so I would just check the best site for the pricing and check it out. All right. Thank you for your time and attention on YouTube. If you want to join us for live conversation, head on over to our Black Table Talk Facebook page. Thank you, and I'll see you tomorrow.